Welcome back to Careers with Miss V. I am so excited to introduce another incredible guest. Today we are meeting with Kevin Simpson, who is the founder of KDSL Global. Welcome, Kevin. I'm so excited to have you with me today.
Thank you, Ms. V. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is so exciting. We met in person years and years ago, and here you are, all virtual. Let's bring out the awesomeness of the virtual world. And we're talking again, and today we're going to be discussing KDSL Global and also going into your career journey. And then, of course, bringing it to a wrap with some tips for young people, parents, and educators. Talk to us about KDSL Global. Why did you found it? What is KDSL and how does it help young people?
Definitely. So the company was founded originally. So when I first started, so career-wise, I started off as a teacher. I always like to start back at, home base. So that was like back in the day, in the 90s, say late 90s. And as I was teaching, I think the more and more you teach, the more you see other opportunities to consult, to write, to speak, to work with, different institutions, organizations. And so I think sort of in teaching, these opportunities came up to work with textbook companies and publishers and others. And so out of that, I sort of started to do just freelance consulting. And that's sort of where KDSL USA started. So it was like these opportunities would present themselves to, hey, there's this book author, they want a curriculum, or hey, there's this opportunity to consult with a school. And I would just say yes, and take upon, these opportunities to learn. And so I think sort of fast forward through time, it sort of moved from being an independent freelance consultant into wanting a company. And that's where KDSL Global came from. So it was to set up an organization, a company, and I set it up in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, actually in 2016. So I sort of went through this iteration of working in the US and then working overseas in Dubai. And so almost 6 years ago, I set that up. And the focus is on being just a leading learning organization, really centered on empowering educators and education businesses globally. And I say that because that's what a lot of the work that I was doing, involved. It involved mentoring entrepreneurs and people who want to be freelance consultants. It involved working with new schools, starting up, doing consulting work, advisory work, mostly American curriculum schools. And it included just working with different just businesses. So yeah, so that's sort of like the gist of it, just the why behind KDSL Global and sort of where it came from. So moving from like freelance consultant, even before that, from a teacher to a consultant into like setting up a company.
That is so interesting that you started as an educator yourself. And, as an educator myself, I look around at colleagues and I think, I wonder how many colleagues they have that mindset of an entrepreneur, because what you're describing is not what they teach you at teaching practice. I think it's almost something that you have, and it kind of gets inspired as you start to work. Would you say that was the experience for you?
Yeah, it definitely was. And like you said, in teachers college, never, and I always say I wasn't a business major. And going through like the traditional college of education, it was, heavy focus on teaching and learning and curriculum. So there was never talks of there'll be these potential opportunities to be creative, opportunities outside the classroom. And so it just became the context, the places that I was in when I was in Fairfax County, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and then moving overseas to Vientiane, Laos, over to the United Arab Emirates, learning about other opportunities outside of the classroom. Because in all these contexts, I was a teacher. But then again, there were these opportunities that would present themselves with just different creative individuals who were looking and seeking educators' perspectives, thinking about doing something just different for teachers, for educators, and for students and for parents.
I love this. We're definitely coming right back to this. But before we do, I want to go back in time to the younger teenage Kevin. You were interested in public speaking, law, and community. Where was the foundation of those interests, and how did they lead you to where you are right now?
Definitely. I think early on, when it came to like law and public speaking, there were, just reflecting on just stories of individuals throughout history. I'll say history, her story, their story. It were just people and doing these phenomenal works that sort of changed the course of history for people. And So Thurgood Marshall was one of the individuals who I'd read about in school, learned about. He became the first African-American in the U.S. Supreme Court justice, and he worked to desegregate school and education, and he was a civil rights lawyer. And so I think that's sort of where that sort of law bug, at least being interested in policy and law and legal things, came from early on. And then just the ability to speak, to have a voice. And even when I say speak, it's not necessarily through like our spoken word, it's even through writing. And I just, again, have some phenomenal teachers who my advanced placement, advanced English placement English teacher, my public speaking teacher, Mr. Giacomo. She was just stellar, you know, in terms of the feedback she gave. She was very specific. And there was always opportunities to give your opinion, to debate, to have different types of talks within class. And so I think the love of just language and of words really came from that. But again, I think it sort of changed when I got to college, and I was originally like policy. So I was in a school that was focused on like policy, and it was either you want to become, more on the government, work on the government side, or you want to become a lawyer. But I never thought about education policy, so that being a thing. So I ended up double majoring, wanting the two to mix at some point. So that, because I was education and I was policy, they never mixed. And it's interesting to see the work I do today, which is really heavily focused with international schools on diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, which has a policy aspect to it. It has a social justice aspect to it. So again, like you're saying, it sort of comes full circle in some way, shape, or form.
That is so interesting. And I loved how you gave Miss Giacomo a shout out, and how you remembered her after how many years this must be. And that really is the impact of being an educator. And I think anybody watching this right now, any young person, any parent, it's not just about teaching, it's really about empowering, inspiring. And I almost see the role of an educator as paving the way for creativity and opportunities. And curriculum is an instrument, a tool, but not the full package. Would you say that as an educator that you started in the right place for where you wanted to be in terms of the kind of impact you wanted to bring back to the world?
Definitely. And for me, education started. So my first year teaching was in Washington, D.C. So going back to that policy aspect, so I had served in the summer as a White House intern. And so I went from White House intern into the classroom. So again, from the policy side into education. And for me, it was always working in context that, were challenging, but where there was potential. And so I worked in a school in Washington, D.C. that was sort of like high needs, very diverse, but just opportunity. It's like talking to the administrator that was there, it was like just the work that she was seeking to do. Her vision really was one of the reasons why I chose to start teaching there in that context. And then when I think about the places that I've taught, it really always came back to the people, who was the leader, what was the vision, and what was the focus. So yeah, definitely something that sort of stands out, throughout time.
Brilliant. I love it. Okay, let's talk about your top 3 career tips. You say, have a mentor, read on global issues, and volunteer. Now, a young person watching this is thinking, I don't have time. I'm studying. I've got all these things to do and grades to get, because universities and colleges have really, really high expectations. There's so much competition. As a careers practitioner, I keep telling young people, you've got to do different. Don't think about the journey as linear, really broaden your horizons. And here you are saying, have a mentor, read on global issues, and volunteer. What's the tip in order for a young person to understand how to take those top 3 tips and put them into context of their busy lives?
Definitely. And for me, going in at school, I knew Mr. Cummings, the counselor. I knew him very closely. So when it came time for like university, when it came time for just guidance and thinking about your career, on into the future, we had those conversations consistently. I was in his office 2 to 4 times a month, so I mean, that was something that was ongoing, having those discussions and that dialogue. And so I say those because, and I was talking to my older brother earlier, we're talking about how we pay in time with things. And so when you look at your schedule each day, it's like, how am I spending my day? What do I value? What's important? And for me, one thing is making sure that even as an adult, I still reach out to those individuals who are mentors, who have been mentors. Like I talked to a principal who, one of my principals in Virginia 2 weeks ago, I just surprised and called her on a Saturday. And she was like, we have, it's been a year. We so needed to catch up. I'm so glad you called. And I will do that at a time, just call someone from the past who has in some way, shape or form, helped me, supported me, or vice versa, who I've been a mentor to. So I think about, we have the time, and it's even if it's like a 10 or 15 minute check-in or a call with an individual who you look up to, who you aspire to do something because of them. So I say like, that's definitely possible, within that time scope. So when you look at the lay of what am I working on a day-to-day basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, making sure that I would say if people aren't on my calendar, there's a problem, so I think that's so for me. So in that same mindset, making sure, obviously, yes, our friends and our family, but who is there outside of them who can really push us and challenge us to, meet and working towards our goals. In the same way, social media, a lot of youth nowadays, I went back into a school the last 2 years here in the States, and social media is a hot topic. So there's no way, the scholars who I was working with, they were well versed on what was going on around the world, and it might've been through TikTok, Instagram, but there was a way, shape or form that those global issues, when we were discussing them in the class, and it was an international backward program, they knew about them. They were informed. So it's like, so you definitely can read or view, because I'm big on also, again, it doesn't necessarily have to be reading. It could be also viewing or engaging in discussion with peers on what's going on, what's happening in the world, in their world, whether it's in their local context, in their global context, or in their home country. So looking and making sure that they're well versed in terms of different topics that are going on. So again, I think that's, for me, I always look, and then volunteer, I'm big on giving back. Making sure that we're giving back. In some schools, it's required. Some schools, it's a part of, graduation requirements, but just in some way, shape or form, giving back. And I think the earlier you do that, the more it becomes a part of you. So whenever I move to a new place, one of the things I look for is, where can I serve? Where's an opportunity to give? Not just resources, money wise, writing checks, but also my time. Where can I volunteer? Where can I become a mentor? Is there a literacy program where I can read aloud to kids? Is there an opportunity to work if there's a population that needs service in some way, shape or form? So that's those are sort of my big three. And to be honest, I think the college I went to, really, Michigan State University, really, that was the focus, so I think that sort of has stayed on, throughout my career journey too.
Brilliant. And what you talk about in terms of, some schools making it a requirement, studies do show that young people who learn how to volunteer young, and they see families in getting involved in volunteering, tend to become adults who carry on that practice. So everything that you mentioned, by having a mentor, reading, and volunteering, I see these as life practices that young people should start doing when they're young. So I'm like, yes, I love these top 3 tips, but also in looking from the perspective of a young person applying to university or college, different parts of the world have different requirements. In the US, it is more, community engagement. In the UK, it tends to be more experiences of work and combining the learning with what you're doing. And then different parts of Europe will have their different expectations. Canada doesn't even ask for letters of application. It's more university questions, and you kind of have a very limited capacity. But I think overall, what they're looking for is, hey, what have you done that teachers haven't made you do? So gaining these habits, incredible. Now you're wearing several hats. You're an educator, you're an entrepreneur, and you're also an author. You wrote an ebook about your journey. Why did you believe that was something that would be resourceful and impactful for people that follow you and young people that might learn about the work you do?
Definitely. Thanks. And great question. I think after it was I got to almost that 10-year point, it's like a decade coming up that you've, been serving and working all over the world in education. And for me, it was stop and pause and let's reflect, let's think about what are some big ideas, things that you've learned, what stood out to you. And again, how can you give back? because that was a way, that was a piece of it too. And I thought about it giving back because so often people would say, how did you get started? What have you learned? Tell me about your journey. And so I was like, it would be cool just to record and just to sit and just reflect and write these things down. So it's like somewhere, captured. And I think that was the impetus and the idea behind it. Again, how can I give to that next generation of people who are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, an education entrepreneur, wanting to work or having a desire to work around the world. So I think that was the real focus of it, a way to give back and to reflect on just these amazing experiences after a decade.
Brilliant. Okay, watching this might be a set of ears, a set of eyes thinking, wow, Kevin started as an educator. He became an entrepreneur. He also, in that mix, wrote an ebook. Kevin, if there's a teacher watching this right now thinking, what am I supposed to do? I'm only a teacher, or this is all I know how to do. What are some of your tips for them and helping them understand that the career of their dreams doesn't have to be just in the classroom, with no disrespect to educators in the classroom? But we do understand that sometimes professionals feel stuck in their identity of a career, and that transition, especially through this pandemic, we've seen lots of people around the world kind of stuck and not knowing what to do. So what are your tips?
Yeah. So I love how, and I've did this before with some grad students or of course I teach in Bangkok, Thailand in the summers, are passion projects. And so, of course, we've seen this done with scholars, with youth. And I also say at the same time, as a teacher, as an educator, you also do it. So what are some of your passions that are outside of teaching and learning, outside the classroom? And it could be, for some people, it could be like a hobby. I might be into design. I might be into something creative, jewelry making, or something of that nature. So it doesn't necessarily have to be education related. And so I think, deep diving into, things connected to passion projects, us as adults engage in them as well. And then from that, just pursuing it. And for me, I always say, when I was in Dubai as a teacher, so year 2 as a teacher, I literally took 30 minutes a day and worked on the company, just 30 minutes a day. I found 30 minutes each day to work on it. And then it was like, over a year to see what was accomplished as a result, it was pretty wild. Like to see, to reflect and look back and say, okay, that program was done, that curriculum that was wrote, I spoke here. I mean, it was amazing. So even if it's if a passion project, you feel like, oh, I have kids at home, I'm tired after school, I'll say 30 minutes, because you have that. And I always found again, looking back at time, I would look at the time. So I was off of work around 4:30. And so I had after work, rest, sort of relax before I worked out. And then I had this chunk of time between 7:30 and 9:30, 10. And I would just pull out 30 minutes of that and then insert, whatever I want to do that was related to sort of this into the future, I called it. And so I would say pursue a passion project, start there.
Brilliant. And you don't need to be an adult to do that. Young people can do that right now.
That's right.
Yeah. Kevin, it's been so much fun speaking with you and taking us through that journey of your career. If you can leave a young person or a parent with your one last golden nugget, knowing that this one thing could really create inspiration for their future career, what would it be?
I would definitely, it goes back along the lines of what you said with sort of work experience and service. We had, when I was in middle school, and I will never forget it, it was called Day on the Job. And it was optional. And so when I found out, I'm like, oh, I want to sign up because I get to go and spend a day with a lawyer. Oh, I get to spend a day with a doctor. And so these were just cool experiences that were in my hometown, Flint, Michigan, in the US. And I met attorney Lalonda Johnson. She was a lawyer. I spent the day with her. So any of those opportunities that you see, and parents as well as, so parents, if you see those things that are posted in school, those opportunities, again, outside of school, grab them, make your child aware. Because my mom definitely did that a lot. And then same thing, scholars, when you see those opportunities that are, any type of design challenges, again, things that you're interested in, anything futuristic, sign up. Just again, get involved in some way, shape, or form. Because again, you might from there find your passion. You might find what it is that you really, really, really want to do and hone in on. So again, just getting involved, and whether, like I said, from the work experience, that was a piece. And it was like I was in like 7th grade doing those things.
Brilliant. I love it. I love it. Kevin, so much fun. Thank you for being here with me. It really has been, I'm going to say it again, so much fun talking with you.
Well, awesome. Thank you again so much.
Brilliant, brilliant. And thank you everybody for watching. That brings us to a wrap. Careers with Miss V. We were speaking with Kevin Simpson, the founder of KDSL Global. We will see you all at the next Careers with Miss V